and I'm trying to look at different ways we can mitigate or stop multiple stressors on coastal ecosystems. And so for that, I typically work with a lot of different predator species, such as sharks or grouper or snapper, those sorts of animals. And I work in ecosystems such as like tidal creeks, mangroves, coral reefs, seagrasses, salt marshes, oyster beds. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about shorelines or coastal communities.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you work with predators. Which one's your favorite to work with?
My favorite predators to work with, I mean, I love sharks. That I'm also an ambassador for Sharks for Kids, and that is one of the reasons. They're absolutely magnificent. But I've most recently been working with, and you'll see in my talk today, the Nassau grouper. Really lively, characteristic little fish.
Fantastic. Okay, so your presentation today is about these animals. So I'll just leave the floor to you. And so while you talk, I'll take down some questions that I'll get to you at the end.
All right, sounds good. Let's hope that the PowerPoint works and everybody, in case there's technical difficulties, we'll just do a little patience, but I'll probably talk through the technical difficulties if they occur. All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Does that sound good?
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. All righty. Go ahead here and see if it works. Alrighty, so like I said kind of in my introduction, I do study marine predator species, and this has allowed me to have quite an amazing opportunities throughout my career, where I have had the experience to dive 100 feet underwater with this lovely coral reef predator, a Nassau grouper, to using drones, getting an aerial view of sharks and rays swimming through different tidal creeks in the Bahamas. So why do I study marine predators? I'm really interested on the strong influences that they can have on the environment around them. Also, predators are awesome. I mean, let's just consider sharks for a minute here. Sharks, there's the largest fish in the entire ocean is a shark. It's this whale shark. And they feed on the tiniest little organisms like krill. They're like really tiny shrimp. Sharks are also extremely clever. Consider this little wobbegong here on the bottom left of my computer screen that I'm circling. These wobbegongs are so clever, they'll bury their heads into the sand and camouflage and wait for prey or things they eat to just come up above their mouth so they can snap the fish. Sharks are also extremely successful. Sharks have been around on this earth for over 450 million years. And that's before any dinosaur was on land. But, and also, so predators, I feel, are really well known for eating. But they do more than just eat. But I'm sure many of you have heard that predators are important because they eat, when they eat their prey, they keep their prey populations healthy and balanced, feeding on weak or sicker individuals. But predators, they have those strong influences on their surroundings through different ecological and evolutionary processes. They can change their prey's appearance over time. So if you look in this red coral, can anybody see a crab species? Incredible camouflage just so that they can hide and not be seen from predators or other organisms. Predators can also change their prey's movement. And I think here in this middle guy, you see like a school of fish or a bait ball. That way they're moving with safety in numbers. They can also change over time their prey's habits. So here is an example of grunts in tropical coral reef systems where they will rest in coral reefs during the day and they don't feed until nighttime to try to avoid detection from their predators. So today I wanted to go over the ecology of marine predators. And to do that, I'm going to try and answer about 4 questions. Why are marine predators important? What is an apex predator? So we'll go over a couple little terminology that hopefully we can learn today. How do marine predators affect their environment with specific examples? And then what are some ways we can help marine predators? And so I've been using the word ecology a lot. So the word ecology just means that we are studying how species interact with one another as well as their environment around them. And one way we can study species interactions is by looking at food webs, or who is eating whom. And so in this example here, this is a food web that I've worked in the Bahamas, where you have a top predator of a tiger shark, or it's also known as apex predator, where they are, again, eating influence on their surrounding environments. But by what they eat, such as sea turtles or larger carnivorous fish, they can help keep these populations from being overpopulated so that they're not overeating smaller fish or even sponges or lobsters. Another way to look at food webs is through food web pyramids. And food web pyramids kind of show you 2 things. And so we're going to learn another terminology here called trophic level. And so a food web allows you to see what organisms and what trophic level they are, so where their energy source is coming from, what they're eating. And I'm sure you all actually know what trophic level is. I've seen it a bunch. So you have primary producers getting their energy from the sun. You have herbivores, they're eating those plants. And then you have other organisms that eat other animals until you get that apex predator or top predator, where they have no natural predators of their own. The other thing that food webs or food web pyramids really help us with is trying to see the number of individuals in a given area. And it's a representative number in that pyramid component. But like I was saying, predators do more than just eat. And so the 3 things I'm going to go over today is how they can influence their communities or environments around them. And that is going to be through eating, scaring or predator risk behavior, and even pee. Yes, predator pee can be important, so we'll save that one for the end. And so these are examples that I have done quite a bit of research in and that I'm most comfortable with, but you can find many examples in marine systems or in any system for that matter. So here, trophic, again, trophic is just letting us know where you're getting your energy source from, what you're eating. And so we're going to go over a trophic cascade and how a predator can affect the environment around it. And here we're taking you to southeast United States in salt marshes. Salt marshes are these beautiful, right along the coastlines, a bunch of nice grass. And in this grass, we have a periwinkle snail that lives on the grass, as well as our predator here, which is a blue crab. And what happens is that in the salt marsh, we have this periwinkle snail that will put little tiny scars. They eat the grass, and specifically how they eat that grass is they'll create scars on the marsh grass, and then later they'll come back and eat it all up because they're actually planting some scrumptious little food for themselves. But what can happen is if you have too many snails, you won't have that beautiful salt marsh grass because it'll all be grazed away by these snails. However, when the predator is present, this predator, one, eats snails so they don't become overpopulated and overgrazing of that grass, but also those periwinkle snails can smell those predators, and so they eat less often. And so by the blue crab being there and consuming these periwinkle snails, it has an indirect positive effect on this grass because there will be more grass if there are less snails. And so that's what we call a trophic cascade, where one organism is having a positive effect on another organism indirectly by having a negative effect on its prey. And so how do we researchers study this? Well, we simply put these things called mesocosms, or cages, over the grass, and we had cages with and without crabs, and we counted how many snails would stay in that cage, as well as looking at how much grass stayed over time. And so the next example I wanted to go through was a project that I was on in Western Australia in Shark Bay ecosystem. And so here we're talking about seagrass beds. We have our herbivore, a green sea turtle, and then we have our predator species of a tiger shark. And this is an example of a trophic cascade, but not through eating, but through predator risk behavior. Closest emotion we can kind of have to that is scaring or being feared. And so a little background on how we actually got these, on how researchers over there were able to find these results, is that we would tag our species of interest, like this tiger shark, and our herbivore, and we would actually have GoPros on them to look at their movements over time and how they reacted when sharks were present and when they were not. And so this is a little bit of a simplified version of predator risk behavior. But over years and years of studying the movements of these tiger sharks and these sea turtles, what these researchers found was that when tiger sharks were present, the sea turtles had a really specific feeding behavior, where they would go around a seagrass bed, essentially in the deep parts of the water, and just kind of pruning that seagrass bed, kind of like if you were to prune the bushes in your yard. But the seagrass, by just eating around the rim of that seagrass, the seagrass bed would stay intact and would still grow. And then when sharks were not present in the area, we found that the sea turtles' feeding behavior changed. And in fact, they were in the super, super shallow waters, grazing anywhere and as much as they wanted, and eating a lot of the seagrass that could be really important for the critters that live in that seagrass bed. And so here is an example of how just when a predator is simply present, it can really change the behaviors of different animals around them. And so here the thought is that the sea turtle changes its behavior when the shark is there, so that it's in deep water and it can escape when necessary. And coincidentally, you get a beautiful seagrass bed where all these inverts, like crabs and snails and shrimp, can still live in. And then for my very last example, so we're seeing examples of how predators can change the environment around them through eating and through predator risk behavior, or kind of scaring. And then the last one I wanted to get to was pee. And so this is my most recent research. It's also called consumer-mediated nutrient effects, but it's essentially fish are peeing. And so what you have here is you have different fish, and all these fish eat other organisms. They either eat other fish, and you have these beautiful coral reef ecosystems. And what happens with these coral reef ecosystems is they provide a lot of habitat for a lot of organisms to stay in place all together and kind of congregate. And so what you get through that is you get a lot of fish in one place. And what are those fish doing all day besides swimming around, maybe resting, maybe getting cleaned up? They are peeing like nonstop all day. And in fact, their pee, let's get through here, sorry about that. In fact, their pee can be a really important resource for the primary producers around in that area. And so by peeing a certain amount of nitrogen and phosphorus each day as a really healthy, big aggregation of fish, you will see around coral reef ecosystems, you can see increased coral growth as well as seagrass growth. And this can even cascade to other organisms, not just those primary producers at the bottom of our food web, but can also affect the organisms that eat that seagrass. And that's what I'm actually studying right now, so I don't have quite the answers for you there, but now we're looking into, based on this fish pee, when you get this seagrass growth over by coral reefs, how is this affecting the animals that are living in that seagrass? So really, it's incredible how much influences these animals can have on the environments around them through their eating, by just being present, changing behaviors of their prey. And then they can also affect through providing nutrients through fish pee, helping seagrass and even corals grow. And so my last little tidbit of today is I wanted to let y'all know in some ways you can help marine predators. Because a lot of marine predator populations are actually either threatened or endangered or are moving towards that. So when we think of sharks in the beginning, I used it as an example. Sharks alone, over 100 million sharks per year are taken out of our oceans from us fishing. And just like them, many other organisms are like predator fish species like grouper or snapper are being overfished. We also are changing and harming marine predators by changing environments that they need to eat and where they need to develop in their nursery systems through shoreline development. And then another last thing that is happening with marine predators and why they need our help is we are changing their habitats through nutrient loading, so by runoff water. So it's really important that we understand how we are affecting marine predators and how we might be able to change that and reverse some of our impacts. And so some easy ways for you to try to help marine predators is to become an advocate. Learn about sharks. Learn about whatever predator you enjoy. I love Nassau grouper. I love sharks. But become an advocate. Speak for them. Learn about them. Be a caring consumer. So be careful about what you're purchasing at the store and making sure that it's sustainable. And then lastly, you've got to share your knowledge. You've got to spread the word about what you know so that other people can care just like you. And so with that, thank you all for being a fantastic audience and listening through me, the talk, and happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you so much for that. That was really interesting. Okay.
You're welcome.
So sorry, we have lots of questions. Once again, I'm really sorry if we can't get to all of your questions. I'm going to start with a really easy one. What's your favorite shark?
My favorite shark is the lemon shark. Lemon shark live in really shallow waters. They're always a shark species I see in the mangroves or in seagrass beds. And I'm blonde and they're yellow, so it's fitting.
Yeah, I do love lemon sharks, and they're a very special species because they pretty much started shark research, so
yeah,
they're really interesting.
Exactly. And they were one of the first ones I worked with, so yeah.
And I always ask our guests, for anyone out there who might want to become a marine biologist or a shark scientist, what is your advice?
My advice is to ask a lot of questions. and see what you could be doing, whether you're 10 years old, 15, 20, or 40, what you could be doing to try to ask questions and be a scientist. Because that's really what we are. You know, we're little kids that get to ask really cool questions in unique ways. And so to just always be open to that and really not, I feel when I was going through school, so I did have to go through a lot of school to study to be a scientist. After high school, I went to undergrad, and then I did a 6 years graduate program for my PhD. So that was very intensive. But one thing I learned, and I try to tell all my students, is to just ask a ton of questions of what you can be doing. What experiences could you be having? And yeah, there are endless experiences you could have to try to make it possible for everyone to be involved.
Fantastic. And what's your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job, I do really enjoy outreach and mentorship. And so in addition to doing research, I also try to help undergraduates and graduate students really kind of find their career path and what they want to do for their future. And that is extremely rewarding to me. And then my other one is trying to apply these questions that we're asking about predators and how it can help coastal human communities.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with fishermen communities. I want to live in a tiny shack on a marsh, you know, on a little fisherman shrimp community or what have you. And I want those to be around for a really long time. So if my research can help those communities stay intact with nature, that would make me extremely happy. And I enjoy applying my research towards those.
Yeah, it's something that I find really interesting with my research I feel the need for my research to fit into a bigger picture and to make sure that it's not just research, it's also helping people and it's helping animals and it's, you know, all encompassing. So yeah, I definitely relate to that. Okay, so some of the other questions that we have are, so you mentioned that you use a drone for some of your research and people were really interested in that. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your drone research. Some people were asking if sharks ever try and attack the drone, for example.
Oh, well, that's amazing. No, they haven't yet. But yeah, so I feel a lot of researchers were understanding the negative impacts we can have on species, and predator species tend to be very vulnerable to what we're doing to the earth. They are large, they have large home ranges, they take a really long time to mature, and so they're really sensitive to things like overfishing or habitat change. And so as a researcher, we want to reduce that impact as much as possible, even in the way we study them. And so instead of catching sharks, I mean, we release them. It's like a little doctor visit, you know, we get their length and their weight and everything, and it's relatively non-invasive. However, like doesn't affect them too much. But it still disrupts their day a bit, you know, they're still not roaming. And so the idea came from, you know, here was my study site when I was doing that drone study. We have areas that have no habitat change to areas that are fully developed without having these mangroves lying here where these sharks and rays could find prey. Also, if you look down at that aerial view of the drone, there's a little nurse shark right there, by the way. It's very hard to see in the shot, but you can see how clear the water is. And so I wanted to test if drones could actually detect these shark species without having to disturb their daily movements when they might be roaming these little, this is what a tidal creek is, when it's roaming these tidal creeks either for resting or for trying to find food. And so that's what I would do, is I would simply, on really calm days, take a drone and go up and down these tidal creeks and count how many sharks and rays, you'd even see sea turtles were there. And it showed, and pretty much you could see all the sharks. We even did like a drone detection. We had fake sharks in the water at various like depths and different clarities of the water in our study site to see if we could still detect them. And so it was very successful for the questions we were asking. Yeah, and it, you know, it did not disturb them. And if there were any birds in sight, we just wouldn't do a survey that day. That's the only thing that seemed to be a little bit aggravated, that was in the air.
Great, that's so cool. I've actually just acquired a drone to start doing some drone research myself. I don't have such clear waters out in Ireland, but hopefully I can still spot them out at sea.
Yeah, maybe.
That's really cool. Yeah. Okay, a lot of people found the research about pee really interesting as well. Really cool. I'm also starting some research on that, but there's a great question that someone asked, if sharks pee all the time, can their prey detect them before they come and get them by smelling the pee?
That is a really great question. I do not study olfactory smell. I don't necessarily study those type of effects of sharks or other predators, but in many ecosystems and different communities, prey can smell their predators. Like the little periwinkle snail, it can smell that blue crab. It sends off this chemical cue that it's in the water. And again, I don't do research. I don't have this, checked, but I would imagine that that smell of that excretion, that pee could have an effect.
Yeah. And one of the other questions about it is, do they also poo? And what's the importance of poo?
So they do, and that is just both of them are really hard to study. And so I got into fish pee from some of my colleague, Dr. Jacob Algayer, really helped me with a couple of my chapters in my PhD thesis. And it was an incredible amount of work just to try to estimate how much each fish is peeing relatively, per minute, per hour, per day. And so that is what, that's what I've stuck with for that. But yeah, they also do. So any of my research, we get to say that it's conservative in its effects. Because we're just studying one part of the excrement.
Amazing.
But there are people that study shark poop, so you can look it up. You can look it up out there.
Yeah.
There are quite a few people that are studying shark poop.
There's some great videos online as well of people who are on a dive and a shark comes swimming past them and then just poos in the water. And so some people also had questions about mangroves and seagrass and how important they are, what their benefits are to coastal communities, and what are the biggest threats to them.
That is really, really great questions. I'm such a visual learner, and I don't exactly have a visual for this, but I'm going to try. Sure, we'll use that one. Or wait, where do I have an invert one? No, okay. But seagrass ecosystems, as well as mangroves, and if nobody knows what a mangrove is, a lot of the times we're talking about a red mangrove, where it's on land and in the water, but it has these really cool, like, stick-like roots that prop out like this, so that fish can, like, swim in and out of them. And so for the prey and for the predators aspect of it, they create a lot of habitat structure, something to hang out in, something to rest in, something to hide in, and also something to search for food. The mangroves on the top also provide a form of shade for them. And so what mangroves and seagrass beds for a lot of larger top predators, we tend to call them really critical nursery habitats. And so nursery, it's parallel with humans too. Nursery, where you're growing up. It's a place to develop. It's a calm, safe place. And seagrass beds are still the same. They with their with their blades of seagrass, they create this like little canopy of refugia or protection for all the invertebrates, the crabs, the snails, the shrimp, the worms that live in there. And all of this is very important food. And if anybody loves lobster, I mean, at least spiny tail lobster in Caribbeans, I mean, this is right where they grow up, is in these seagrass beds. They're also really important as a service to us humans, seagrass beds and mangroves forests. They reduce a lot of the wave action. Incredible videos online, by the way, of mangroves doing this, reducing wave action from storms to try to protect that protecting that shoreline. And then, not to get too technical into this, but because they have a lot of root systems and plant material, they hold in a lot of carbon and really help sequester some of those from the atmosphere of having too much carbon.
Fantastic. So they're really, really important ecosystems. And you get mangroves out in the Bahamas and also seagrass, and we get seagrass over here as well. Are there similar ecosystems around the world as these two?
So there are mangrove seagrass ecosystems all throughout the world. It's mostly around the that tropical belt. Something that would be, right as you just get a little bit more north, you have salt marshes are doing very similar things, such also like oyster reefs. They're these little shells that create these awesome little forms of habitat. They reduce water flow. They are those nursery habitats and foraging grounds for these large fish. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have? What is in all of the animals, let's go with animals, the predators that you've studied, which ones are the hardest to study in your opinion?
So the hardest to study are, the ones that are the coolest for everybody to see. Sharks are incredibly difficult to study. One that I'm, they're very large. They have large home ranges. They move everywhere. If you can remember when I was studying in salt marshes, we could simply just put a temporary cage over the whole community. And, the snails and the crabs, they behave just fine in there. Their ranges are relatively small for us to ask questions about them. Yeah, sharks, the larger, the longest lived, the more sensitive to, being touched or altered in any way. They're just so incredibly difficult, but still worth it.
Yeah. Sure. And in general, not just the ones that you've studied, I think some of the most difficult sharks to study would be deep sea sharks, because it's definitely incredibly difficult to go and find them. You can't. So yeah, we have quite a few questions about people asking what's the most difficult shark to study. Deep sea sharks would probably.
Deep sea sharks, which this Wednesday, Dr. Dean Grubbs will be talking about deep sea sharks. I really recommend you watch that one. He's been working with sharks for over two decades. So it's pretty incredible, the research that he's doing, and you'll get to see what it's like to study sharks 1,000 feet down, really deep, where there's no sun.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, Dean Grubbs is definitely recommend seeing. He's been down in submarines and everything. Very jealous of his life. Okay, and I'll ask one last one, and that's, do you think that people's perceptions of sharks has changed for the better?
I think it is changing for the better. I think our connecting, being able to talk to scientists, being able to talk to people who have the opportunity to swim with these animals, we've really been able to communicate or just talk with one another how, things like sharks are not man-eating machines. Sadly, we're all really influenced by advertising, marketing, and there is just this thing, you think of Jaws with sharks, and as you should. They are big, successful predators. You definitely need to respect them. But I really think we're moving towards the direction of understanding that we're not on the menu for sharks. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's watching this as well. And thank you for your questions. Once again, sorry if we didn't get to everyone's. I really recommend, if you are still looking for answers to your questions, to go on the Sharks for Kids websites. We have fact sheets, we have activities and posters and videos and coloring sheets. So there's everything you could ever want on there. And there's also the scheduled times and links for this week's webinars, the upcoming webinars. So definitely check it out. You can also follow us on social media. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much again, Dr. Enie Hensel.
Thank you. This was a pleasure. Thank you all for sticking around and listening, and go be that predator advocate and spread your knowledge of what you're learning about predators today.
Are you on social media at all so that people can follow you? Or?
Yes, I am. I have my own website, eniehensel.com, as well as on Twitter @EnieHensel. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Alrighty.
And see you later.
Bye. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks.
Okay.